It was February 2020. Krisdee Clark found herself waiting on a phone call after a biopsy. Her husband was 8,000 miles away on deployment in the Middle East. Family was busy. She was all alone. It was at noon when the phone rang. It is breast cancer. The next couple of years were chemo, radiation, a double mastectomy, and reconstructive surgery. But God had a few surprise blessings to hand to Krisdee and her family amongst the trauma, the treatment, and PTSD of cancer. Pageantry. Her mission as she got involved was to love and encourage other women traveling the same road, showing that through faith, family, and purpose, the battle is worth fighting for. And though your life changes much during trying times, you can impact others in the process. Winning Mrs. South Carolina and on to becoming Mrs. American 2022, Krisdee has shared her story with thousands of women. We met at Mrs. American 2023 this past August, as I had the privilege to represent as Mrs. Alabama. I was drawn to Kristee's honesty, her boldness, personality, and just how down to earth she was. Little did I know what a mighty warrior God had raised her up to be. Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2. And I want to introduce you to my beautiful friend, Krisdee, who also happens to be Mrs. American 2022. But beyond that, she has quite an amazing story to tell you. And I want her to tell it from the horse's mouth. And I just get to be here to ask all the questions. So, Krisdee, welcome.
Thank you. It's so good to see you and be with you.
I know. I love your spunky hair. You're just the cutest, the cutest.
It's my fun vibe today.
And I love it. It works.
Thanks.
It works. And it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So why don't we get into that? Because you, my friend, are a breast cancer survivor. And that's kind of become your mission in the last few years.
Absolutely. So a little bit about my background. I am a military wife, and I'm a mom of 2 and a bonus mom to 3 boys. So we are quite busy at our household. And when my husband and I got married in 2019 and we blended our family and it was fantastic, things seemed to be just, top of the world type stuff. And he was going off to deployment. And that really was like our one dragon that we had to slay. He was going to go off to a deployment. We were just getting married, but you know what? Hey, that's okay. Go in the Middle East. I know him as a lieutenant colonel in the Army, so we knew that was sort of our life. Yeah. So he goes off, and sure enough, a month later, I am going in for a regular mammogram. It would be my second mammogram that I ever had. So I was 41. The first mammogram went fine. I did have what's called dense breast tissue, meaning that lumps and bumps were not unusual. And so went in for my mammogram after being in the shower about a month before and feeling pain in my breast, but nothing crazy, nothing that alarmed me. I did mention it to my husband. He's like, well, make sure you talk about it on your next appointment, which I did with my gynecologist. And he said, thank God that he is the diligent doctor that he is. And he said, let's go ahead and send you not only for a mammogram, but a diagnostic where we would do the ultrasound and everything because of the dense breast tissue. So long story short, in that time frame, I was diagnosed with invasive lobular carcinoma with no family history, did not carry the BRCA gene, anything like that. And that is really where my story began.
So I remember reading several of your blogs about this time. Your husband's 8,000 miles away serving. What was his reaction to this? Because, and from what you wrote, your family wasn't there. You were literally alone at home when you got the call.
Yeah. So my dad had come in from Nashville, Tennessee. And it was kind of silly. I was like, Dad, I mean, really, do you really need to be here for this? Like, it's not going to be anything. And so sure enough, he comes in and He was in the living room. I had gotten up that morning. We knew that the news would be coming that day. So I had I had had my mammogram. They had me come in just a few days later to have my biopsy. And then that would have been on a Friday. So I knew I'd have to wait the weekend to find out the results on that Monday. So my dad came in that weekend. And we, I had gotten up, I'd gone into my bathroom to get ready for the day. My children were with their dad, so it was just sort of a quiet house that morning. And the call came in, and I was like, okay, good. This is just gonna end it, and we'll be good. I can go, live my life. My husband being 8,000 miles away, we had talked, and of course, there's this massive time difference that we're dealing with now. So morning is night, night is morning, and so we're talking back and forth. And I had been so naive to what breast cancer really was and what it meant. I did not know that there were many types. I didn't know that there were different names. I didn't know they meant different things and different treatments. And my reaction, kind of joking with him, was like, well, you know what, if I do, oh well, I'll just have them taken off and I'll have a mommy makeover. I mean, we were sort of having this fun little dialogue, thinking that it was never going to be that, so we didn't have to
But then
worry about
it's
it.
not. You don't wanna take it to that extreme if it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I got the call, answered the phone, and it was the nurse navigator. And she said, Krisdee, do you have a minute? I said, yes. And she said, just very matter of fact, you do have breast cancer. And it was in that moment that I asked her to repeat herself. And I said, did you say I do? And she said, yes, ma'am, you do. And she went on to tell me, come tomorrow. We have you in the system. Your schedule, your appointments are scheduled. You're going to come and meet with the doctor, who would be your surgical oncologist. And of course, I'm just sort of in space at this moment, like, what is going on? And called my husband, called my mom, who was at work, and then also called my husband, who was 8,000 miles away. And he was actually eating dinner, a late dinner. And he said, okay, what'd they say? And I said that I have breast cancer. And it was in that moment that he and I both cried. Not, sobbing, or it was just this, oh my gosh, this is happening. And it was also in that moment that I said, regardless, I have to handle this with grace. And I don't know why God put that on my heart the way that he did, but he did, like, fiercely. And I knew that it would be imperative to me to handle this moment this year with grace for so many people. And I thought it was my children. I thought it might be my husband, my mom. I just thought, okay, had no idea where that grace and that determination would actually lead and where God had me going.
Oh, my hairs are standing up on my arm. Oh my goodness. Well, in the initial, you have breast cancer. If it had been me getting that call, I think I kind of would have been in a stage of shock where the emotions are not playing out. Is that kind of how you felt talking to your mom and dad, and then finally it kind of hit you a little bit while you were talking to your husband? Okay, I have.
Yeah, it was. I think it's like, once you are, I'll say, I can only speak for myself, who has children. So I don't want to discount people who don't have children, but I'm going to speak from it from a mom point of view. I think it's like, how when your children get hurt, even though you might be like, oh my gosh, you have to do that sort of like, okay, you're fine, it was sort of like that. And it was so innate that it was just like, okay, this is what we're doing. We're not going to freak out. It really was a calming feeling around me. And I really believe that that was the Lord just wrapping me up and saying that it was going to be okay, and that he had so much more for me. And so and then when I talked to my husband, I think it was the one person that I could be extremely vulnerable with, and that I could kind of break too. But even in that moment, I didn't fully break. I did break, but it wasn't until much later in my journey.
Oh, wow. Well, I think that says a lot, and I know we'll come back to this, but you've written a children's book.
I
How
have.
this process, correct? And how
I
to tell your
have.
children. So, how did you sit down and tell your kids and your blended family, like you're a new mom to them as well? How did you do that?
Yeah, so kind of going back a little bit, I started a blog that I have called the Blonde Bombshell, after a sweet name that my husband has always called me, as a journaling way. And through that blog and how many women reached out to me through that blog, what I was noticing was the same thing that I was going through, which was there was no information from women that had been through it. So I get information from doctors, I get all this stuff, but they haven't been through it. And it's also normally men telling you something. And I thought, well, but I need the real stuff. Like I need to know what, that's just the kind of person I am. I needed all the information. And so I was like, I'm not going to have anybody else go through this. So I started blogging and helping that way. But then as I was telling my children, one of the other things that I noticed was there were no resources for that in that regard. There were no, how do you tell your children and how much do you tell them? At the time, my children were 8 and 5. So it was like this, I don't know exactly how to tell them. And this is also in 2020. So we're talking height of COVID.
Right.
So much going on. Children are home trying to learn. I know that I'm going to have this surgery, have no idea if I'm going to live or die. Everything was just sort of thrown in at one time. So I wanted to write a children's book so that women had a way to tell this if it's their story, but also for those who have family members. I mean, it may not be something that is about you and your children. And maybe let's read this book, although it's from that perspective, it would help that if a grandma or a grandfather has an ailment like that they're able to share that. So I sat my children down right here. I knew from the moment that I found out there, again, God just provided so many what I call love notes for me throughout this journey. And one of them was telling my children. And I knew that I had to be transparent with them. And that came in the form of if I was going to lose my hair, I wanted them to shave my head so that I didn't just come home and not have hair one day, that it would be a process that our family would go together in. And so I sat them down, and my son's in kindergarten and my daughter's in 3rd grade and at the time, and they're sitting there. And I said, I have something to tell you. And of course, again, I am by myself, like husband is gone. We're trying to get him home through the Red Cross and all that stuff. And I said that I had breast cancer, and my daughter kind of looked at me strange and said, okay. And my son was kind of like, huh, okay. And I tried to explain what that was as best I could, that there are, cells in your body, and those little cells turn over, and sometimes they make really nasty things in your body, and that's what's cancer. And my daughter said, I know what cancer is. And she said, but mommy, don't people die from cancer? And it was at that moment, it was crushing. And I couldn't tell her no. I had to say yes. I mean, it was part of my journey, and I didn't know if I was going to survive this at that moment. So I truly had to say, yes, baby, they do, but we are going to fight this. And part of my journey was really about the David and Goliath story. And so I tried to use that analogy of, I'm this little person with my slingshot and my rock trying to slay this giant. And so our faith played a very large role in that and how I told them. And it also plays a very large role in my book.
Well, I love that, because there are so many children's books coming out these days that have the opposite kind of effect on children. And I'm just so proud that yours has a positive message, and has to do with your faith. So when you got the call, they said that they had you on the books for tomorrow, the very next day. So what happened that next day?
So my dad stayed in town, and my stepmom, and my mother lives not far from me, and we're very close. And my husband was going to call in, and my sister lives right down the road. So there was, 5 of us roughly going, one on a FaceTime. And I walked in, and the doctor, with a very dry sense of humor, I guess, or he was being serious, to this day, I can't say. And he came in, I walked in, and he said, well, I see you brought your entourage. And he said it just like that, and kind of this like weird face. And one of the things people tell you is when you're diagnosed with anything, but especially cancer, always have someone there to sort of write notes. Well, I knew my mom would be beside herself. There's no way I was going to retain this information. My sister could have done it. My dad, is just sort of out there right now because, again, I'm his daughter. I'm her daughter. These are very difficult times. So Sandy, my stepmom, actually was writing the notes about everything he said, which was extremely helpful. And they all were kind of taken back that he made that sort of talk, that kind of comment. And I thought, well, isn't this strange? Like, I know you see people all day long with cancer, but this is my first rodeo, so I'm bringing everybody, my whole support team. But I knew in that moment that was a first of, I'm not sure if I like this. And then it wasn't, I felt more like a widget in the system. And I say that a lot in my speaking, is that it's great for some people. That's not great for me. Like, I need to know the ins, the outs, what we're doing, what's going on. And they just sort of want to put you in the system and you just sort of roll with it. So that next day was filled with that conversation, me coming home and saying, I'm really not sure I like this surgical oncologist. My mom was sort of that mindset of, well, just get it out. Who cares if you like them? It was that kind of like craziness. And I had told him during that time that I wanted to make sure that I had a double mastectomy. And he said, well, a bilateral is extremely aggressive. It's very radical. We don't even know if you need that right now. And I looked at him and I said, listen, I'm telling you that's what I want. And there was a couple reasons for that. The first reason was that I knew me, and I would be up all night anytime I had any kind of pain or anything, and I would be like, it's back, it's back, it's back. I know it. And I'm so thankful that I went that route, because they will tell you that the statistics are not any greater, but I sat in this oncology office with multiple women on the times that I did my chemo who were back because they had a lumpectomy or had one, single mastectomy, and then it came back in the other. And I was just like, praise God, I didn't do this, because I just know I would not have done well with that. It would have been very, very stressful for me. So I told him that. And again, that was kind of strike number 2 for him, and, as far as I was concerned, because it is very important that we advocate for ourselves, especially women. Women's health is not as advanced as it should be. And we have things that we need to be more advanced on. Now, whether or not those things are actually in the works, or they already know things, there's a conspiracy theory for you. But I really do believe that. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I do think that. I mean, there's no doubt that, chemotherapy is $80,000, and that's a lot of money. And there's just way too many people that have cancer for us not to know a little more than we do. And so I'm hoping that we find out more information and that this can truly be cured, because 1 out of 8 women are going to be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. And that's just way too many, just way too many.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that there's ways that we can combat that just by our health, but we don't know all of the little intricate details of everything that's in our foods, and
So
all
true.
causing cancers, not just food, but products and all of that kind of
So
thing.
true. That is so true. And I was a 1%er. And what that means is that I did not have the BRCA gene like we talked about. So there was no reason for me to have breast cancer. And mine was an estrogen positive. So strike number 2 for me. Now, that is a really, really good thing from the standpoint of getting rid of it. Estrogen positive cancers are usually easier to get rid of. But that meant complete hysterectomy, can't have anything with estrogen in it, and anything, even the candles we smell and stuff, produce things in our body. And so it is one of those things that I would be like, well, was it my makeup? Was it my, soap? Was it my laundry soap? Is it something I'm breathing? Is it something I'm eating? So then you start freaking out about all these things around you, and there are no answers. So I had to get to a point where I just thought, well, I've got to be able to live my life, because I don't have the answers to what it is.
Right. Right. I wish people and doctors especially were so much more transparent, but there's no money in transparency and honesty.
Exactly. There's not.
Less sick people you have, the less money that you're going to make. So
That's
from
right.
diagnosis to you actually having a double mastectomy, did you go through any chemo or radiation before you had the double?
No, so since mine was invasive lobular, and an estrogen positive cancer, I had to have an MRI. And again, at that point, so backing up a little bit, I didn't like this physician, didn't like the surgical oncologist. And so I knew I wanted a double mastectomy. He finally agreed to that and said, after my MRI came back and they told me it was larger than they originally thought. Now, that is not abnormal. So women listening to this that are a little worried about stuff like that we just are not technologically advanced enough to be able to see the tumor exactly for the size it is. So it's not that it grew, it's just that the biopsy and the x-rays and the ultrasounds can't show the exact size. The MRI shows it a little better, but then they really don't know until they get in there. So I'd gone to a plastic surgeon here. The other thing, I talked about that. One of the reasons why I wanted the double was because of me Googling and knowing that I'd be freaked out if it came back, or thinking that it did. But another reason I did was a vanity reason. I was 41 years old. I didn't want to have
Nothing.
Okay, this podcast is called She Speaks, so I'm going to speak. I didn't want to have a 41-year-old breast and a brand new 20-some-year-old breast. I was like, this is not going to look good. And so I was like, take them both. It will be better symmetrically. But I had gone to that plastic guy, and he was like, well, I can't make you the size that you were. You're going to be smaller, and you're going to look reconstructed. And then he said the words that were absolutely shocking to me, which was, but the cancer's going to be out, so you'll be happy. And I was like, okay. And I left there in tears. And I thought, I watch Botched. I watch all these shows, and I know that there is more to this. There's got to be. Like, I'm just with the wrong people, because there's all these women looking great and all this stuff. And I'm like, why do we not have this? Like, what is going on? And, men can go in for all these things and nothing, and they come out perfectly fine, and there's all these advancements, but there wasn't for women's health. And I thought, this is insane. And why should I just be happy with the cancer being gone? That was my number one priority, 100%. But why wasn't it okay for me to also want to look better than I came in? And I thought, wow, like that, this is ridiculous. So I ended up my husband had a good friend that works for the implant line that I use, who actually does a reconstructive type implant. Company's called Mentor, and they got me in touch with Dr. Harper up in Charlotte, which is about an hour and a half from me. And I went to him, and he looked at me when I told him, and I said, listen, I know what you're going to tell me. I can't be the size that I was. I can't be the size I want to be. And, and he looked at me and he said, yes, you can. And it was at that moment that he said, reconstruction is much different than just somebody doing an augmentation. It is truly an art form. You can go to somebody that does an augmentation, and you're going to get that result. You're just going to get the basic whatever. And he said, I absolutely can. And he and I struck up a wonderful friendship. He's a great friend of our families now. And he just really has a heart for women going through this. And even so much, he said, so what do you want to look like? And I would joke and I'd say, Jessica Rabbit. And so he'd go, I got you, girl. And so my whole year of going through all of this with him, it was like a breath of fresh air, and feeling, once again, he never one time made me feel like I should feel bad about wanting to look good, that I didn't just have to be cancer free, that I could actually thrive after breast cancer. And I wanted to let the world know that, because I thought, I've talked to so many women who have chosen not to have reconstruction for this very reason. Now, some women truly choose not to have it, and I say, go for it. Like, I think that's great. It's what you want. But if you do, and you're letting these doctors put this barrier and just saying, well, just be happy you don't have cancer, that's not where we are. We need to be better than that. And so that was my mission.
No, I love that. When you were going through the reconstructive process, how long did that take? Because you had a new opportunity on the horizon. Did you already have reconstructive surgery before you entered pageantry?
I did. So I was never a pageant girl. I love pageants. I love watching them. I think they're great. I had done the Miss Teen USA system back when I was like 14 or 15. Did it once. It was so fun. And it was kind of like, oh, that was fun. And I just went on, I was a fast pitch softball player. So I didn't think much of it. Like, it was just whatever. And as I was sitting here, my husband was able to come home the day before my double mastectomy. We're sitting here talking after I go for my first round of chemo and all that, because it would be, I knew that once I had that surgery and I came out of my surgery, I was told, or he was told, that it was in 2 of my lymph nodes. So the tumor ended up being way bigger than they thought. It was 7.7 centimeters. It wasn't even in the millimeters that they told me it was. And it was much bigger, and it was over to the left, and it was under my arm more. And so it was in 2 out of 3 of the lymph nodes that they took. So I knew if it was in the lymph nodes that I would have to have chemo and radiation. So that was a bummer at first. I thought I might be able to avoid the chemo, and I wasn't. So I knew that I would have the surgery. I would heal from that just a tiny bit, and then I would have to go in for my chemo. I would have 4 rounds of chemo. After round 3, I actually went into anaphylactic shock twice, which allowed me to not have the 4th round of chemo because it literally would kill me. So I had to forego that. And my husband was back in the Middle East by that time. That was so fun. And then I went through 25 rounds of radiation. Well, after I did my radiation, you have to then wait 6 months for your body to heal because it's so red. And I had like an exit wound, like a red kind of blotch, and it was awful. And it's common with radiation. And so I would wait for that to heal. And so that skin needs to heal about 6 months before you can have it. So as crazy as that sounds, it's actually very quick in the grand scheme of things. I was diagnosed February of 2020. I had my mastectomy in March of 2020, so within a month. And within 1 year, March of 2021, I was doing my reconstruction. And in that time, I also had my hysterectomy and things like that. So
That is
it was quite the year
on your body.
It's a lot. It is. And so during that time, as I was writing my blog and people were reaching out to me from all different countries, and it was absolutely wonderful going through this, I was like, wow, I really have a platform. And it was like all of a sudden I equated platform and pageants. And so I asked my husband, I said, I should do Mrs. South Carolina. And he was like, yeah, that's cool. You have a great platform. You should. So I reached out to see how I do that in the America system. And sure enough, it just went from there.
So, not being a pageant girl, I had only done 7 my whole life. So it was not like a career thing for me ever either. And coming in, you knew some, but how did you feel? I mean, God has healed your body. God gave you a piece from the beginning, like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to fight. It's going to be okay. There's something beyond this, bigger than myself. And then you do this pageant, and then clearly you win. How did you go in there with the mindset of, or did you ever have any struggles? I'm going to be 100% Krisdee. God has given me a story that doesn't compare to anybody else's. I just want to be me. How did you feel going into this?
So going into it, I thought it would be a lot of fun. I honestly can say I didn't go into it being like, oh, I'm going to win this, or I've got to win this. It was like, oh, this will be a really great way to get my story out and kind of help people. So first it was on a local level, and I was Mrs. Capital City. I live in the capital of Columbia, South Carolina. And so, I would wear that sash proud, and I would go down to the local breast cancer walks, or I would go to different things. And I was so proud. I mean, if it had stopped there, I would have felt fulfilled. I mean, I was so proud. And it was like, wow, I did so much with this. And then I went to the state pageant and I won Mrs. South Carolina American. And it was so humbling. It was like, I stood on that stage. The question they asked me was about how I was different than the other women on the stage. And it just came very naturally to me, and I said it was my platform. I said, every one of these women is truly wonderful and authentic, and they each could wear this crown proudly. But I really believe what makes me stand out differently is my platform. And what I meant by that, and I talked about it some, is that there's a difference between having a platform and then having a platform that's very authentic and one that you can honestly talk about. I am passionate about a lot of things in life. I'm passionate. I mean, I could list them all, but God gave me a story. And I knew that if there was breath in my lungs, that was my platform. That was my passion. And that's what made me different. So I wasn't seeking difference. It just that I was at this time. And I was so proud that it took 40 years for God to show me my platform. It took 40 years to show me my story in life. I've had lots of fun. I've had lots of stories, and I've liked to think that I've done some good things in life. But this is what God was preparing me for my whole life. And I look back and think, holy cow. I mean, he's been preparing me since I was very young for this, all the way until having a career of, I do tons of public speaking. I mean, are you kidding? Like, that was such a preparation from God to put me where I am now, because my job working for one of the largest hospices is fantastic. And I speak at the state house, and I get to do all these amazing things, but that is not the preparation. God was using this as preparation for what I'm doing as Mrs. South Carolina and then Mrs. American, and now as just the blonde bombshell. So it was a really amazing thing, and it's been really cool to see that. I think one of the things a lot of people don't ever find in their lives is what they were meant for and what God had for them. Maybe they just missed it or they didn't follow it, but it was like I knew. And so when I stood and got that crown, it was humbling and beautiful and wonderful. And then once again, it could have stopped and I would have been like, who would have thought? Like, who would have thought? And then I go to nationals and I meet the most wonderful. I mean, your class was wonderful. And when I met my girls, oh my gosh, and they all have such incredible stories and journeys. And I thought, I'm so lucky just to be here with these people, and I'm having the time of my life, and it was so wonderful. And one of my questions, I got to I was number 13 in the top 15. They called me number 13. So I'm backstage like, okay, okay, okay. And I'd already won for most original costume. So I was like, well, that's great.
Which
And
was
then
sad, by the way.
dog things. And then they called. And so I'm like, I walk out. I'm like, okay, top 15. I feel great. And then I was the first one called for top 6. And then it was like, okay, so I'm going to have to answer a question, which to me is like, yay, because I love that. And then they called, and that question was about what would I want to tell the judges that I didn't get a chance to tell them in an interview. And it was, well, I'd like to talk more about my platform. And that gave me an opportunity to talk about my fellow breast cancer warriors. And then, the rest is history as far as me having the most incredible year and such a wonderful time as Mrs. American, and being able to showcase the blonde bombshell.
Well, I'm so proud of you. When I got to meet you, because if you're not listening, I got to represent the state of Alabama and went as Mrs. Alabama to compete with all the other wonderful women. Like you said, I was meeting women that, what do you do? Oh, I work in a federal prison. I'm sorry, what? Like, just so many these tiny, beautiful women that can kick somebody's butt behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But there was no regret of the whole week, of all of it. But one of the highlights, and I told my husband this, I was like, you've got to meet Krisdee, because she's so down to earth. And that's what I look for in someone who is a pageant queen, is someone that I can relate to, is someone that's not hoity-toity, but kind and open. And that's just how you were the entire time. But another side of you that I feel I registered with, because we've talked before, and I've always rode that line. There's a line right here. You say, don't cross it, Amanda. I'm like, like that. But that's because I want to be unapologetically real for people, so they're not disappointed when they do get to know me. And then 2, I'm also a believer, and anything that I have had or been through and come out the other side is always going to be accredited to my Savior. So can you touch on that a little bit while you actually held the crown? Like, how did your faith play a role in that?
So, it was a journey. I was honored to represent the United States as a military wife. It was absolutely wonderful. And I was honored to represent the United States for the 1 in 8 women with breast cancer. And that is what I focused on. I noticed very quickly why I wasn't a pageant girl. And that was because I would have never fit in. And I don't say that to put anybody that's in pageants down at all, because some of the women that I have met have now become my closest friends. I call them my circle of trust. They are amazing women from South Carolina and North Carolina. We talk daily, and I don't know what I would do without my girls. Like, absolutely, our text chat is the most ridiculous thing you can ever see. And I absolutely love them. And we come from all different just lives and different things, but we do have a lot in common, mainly our faith and the fact that they're just lovely, lovely women who have a heart of gold. But unfortunately, the pageant systems are not all like that. We've seen that with, a lot of the documentaries that have come out lately about different systems. And being unapologetically yourself doesn't fit the mold in most systems. And I noticed that very quickly. I didn't go along to get along. And I probably was deemed a troublemaker and whatever. And I don't ever think that I caused any trouble. I mean, I certainly wasn't disrespectful to anybody. Everybody that I met has always cared about me and liked me and wanted me around and things like that. But it was mainly the people that are in the system itself made things quite difficult because I was unapologetically myself. So my platform is the Blonde Bombshell. It's thriving and feeling beautiful after breast cancer. If I took a picture in a bodysuit, it's like up to here and long arms, but looks like a swimsuit at the bottom, and then told, oh, that's not really our brand. You need to take that down. It's too sexy. And I'm like, well, that's showing anything. And, meanwhile, you got girls that are competing in swimsuits, but I felt targeted a lot of times. And I felt that my faith played some of that. I felt that my thoughts on certain things played a role in that. And, I wasn't there for them. I wasn't wearing the crown and sash for them. I will always enjoy having been Mrs. American, but what kind of queen would I be if I didn't stand up for the injustices of the system? Or what, if they're not empowering women, then tell me why you're not. And those were sort of where my toe was across the line. I would ask questions. I didn't just go, oh, okay. And you recognized it. You saw me that very first night that I came in at 1:30 in the morning in Las Vegas, the last queen flown in out of the three of us. That I'm sure that's not a coincidence, pictures taken without me, things that went on, lots of events without me, and I smiled my whole way through it. I never said anything, didn't, and there's a big to do about the America versus American title. What's the difference? And I wanted to empower my American sisters that we are a sister pageant. You are not beneath anybody. And I don't like the thought that sometimes people reflect that you are, because what in the world, like what are we competing in, and so there were some times, you see my sash here. There's one picture of me, I'll move my chair a little bit. The picture was like this. I didn't take it purposely that way. Somebody took the picture and it was posted, and I would get things like, please make sure your N is showing on your sash because you're not Mrs. America, you're Mrs. American. And I never wanted to be anybody else. The phrasing for Mrs. American is a league of their own. And let me tell you, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
I mean, we are a league of their own. And having been in that system, I wouldn't have wanted to be the other. I was proud to be Mrs. American. And if that meant that I was the troublemaker or crossed, over with my toe a little too much, I was good with that. And I wear that badge with honor. And I hope that all my fellow Mrs. Americans feel that way, and that we would all stand for what is right and what is good. And I think my faith played a large role in that. I had a farewell video that was supposed to play at the end, and it did. And I was asked to take a portion of that out, which said the name of Jesus Christ. And I wasn't okay with that. I cried for days about that, sobbed to my husband. And I kept telling him I prayed about it, and all I kept thinking was about Peter and denying Christ. And I said, is this me denying him? And I talked to people about this. I talked to pastors about this. I talked to people that I cherish that are good friends of mine who are Christians. And they all were trying to make me feel better about, no, it's not, it's okay, you're not doing it. But I kept having this, oh, it just broke my heart. And would I get to heaven one day and would Jesus say, why didn't you just? So I was prepared to fully say, then don't put my video up. But they did allow me to say my Lord and Savior. And I wore a cross around my neck, but I felt very targeted. I felt like, I was told that the company or the organization is non-sectarian, meaning they have no, they don't want to talk about any religion. And I can appreciate that, but I'm not non-sectarian. I'm a Christian. I'm the one that won the crown and sash. And I often ask myself, would it have been different if I was another religion? Would they have told me I couldn't say that? Would they have said that I couldn't, whatever? I don't want to call out any one religion, but would I have been told that I couldn't do the things of that culture, of that religion? And I don't know. I'll never know that. But I do know as a Christian that I couldn't say the name Jesus Christ. And to me, that was unacceptable.
Well, I remember when you told me, because you and I had discussions there. I know other title holders did as well, our sisters, and you never denied Christ to us. And that's what I appreciate about you. My feet are over the line. So had I ever had a title, it probably would have been like, we're done. But you said you weren't wearing the crown for them. You had your sole purpose from the time that you got diagnosed. You were like, okay, God is going to use this. And he did on a national level. And
he did.
I don't believe that you denied Christ, because you just, by not being able to say the name of Christ in that video, how many times have you been able to tell this kind of story and tell us about Jesus?
So true. And I knew that during my year, I knew that God had put me there. And so it was like the culmination of what was a very difficult year of being constantly kind of told things. And, I was constantly made to feel that I was the troublemaker, that I wasn't doing things the right way. And it was all about being authentic, and it was all about me being true to myself. And I felt like that was important. And then it became wow, God, this isn't just about the blonde bombshell any longer. And it is, but you have now said, oh, you're going to win that crown. I'm going to put that crown on your head, but you're going to win it also for me. And so when that time came around, I don't think I've ever had somebody tell me, and praise God that I live somewhere that I've never had someone tell me that I couldn't say the name Jesus. And so it hit hard. And I wanted to, he had brought me so far, and he had given me a new lease on life. And so I want to make sure I was honoring him in every way I could. And so I was extremely concerned about that. And it did play a role. It played a role in whether or not I would actually even go out to Vegas. I thought about and my husband was like, but if you don't, then it all ends and you won't be doing everything that you set out to do. So it's very hard. And I think it's one of those lessons that God gives us to say, okay, what are you going to do? And it's been a journey. And so I had lots of women out there ask me, are you sad to give it up? Are you, and I think I know you were one of them. And I was like, I'm ready. And I don't say that, I certainly, let me emphasize that I was honored to be Mrs. American, because the title holds so much weight.
Right.
I just wish that we were treated like that in the system itself, and that I was able to do so much more with it. And that's why when people ask me, would you do it again? Heck yeah, I would do it again, because it's important. It was important for God. It was important for my platform. It was important for the women of this world to see that no matter what storm you go through, you can absolutely thrive after it. So I had a bigger mission and a bigger purpose, but that was, not there. Of course, in everything good, you have things that aren't great, and that was mine.
Of course. And I think that I could sense that. My grandmother told me from a young age that I had the gift of discernment. And I can just tell around certain people that there's more. Even if I'm told something, I want to get to know the person for you because I know I have been in your shoes. And if someone has gotten to know me for me, oh, well, maybe we had it a little bit wrong. She just opens her mouth and is willing to insert her foot if she needs to. I would rather apologize and say I was wrong than say nothing and stand for nothing at all. And I think that you did a great job. I've gone back and looked since after nationals was over, and you have done so much with your
Thank
platform.
you.
So you took just this unfortunate diagnosis to healing to a national platform, and you have no idea how many, I'm sure you know some, but you have no idea how many lives, women's lives that you've touched, or families. My aunt went through breast cancer and had a double mastectomy and reconstructive. That's hard on a woman's body. And for you to say, you know what, I am going to approach this and reapproach this as a new creation, if you will, and let God use my faith and do what I need to do. And you're not shy about it. And we need so many more women that are brave and not shy. And you know the truth of power and healing and direction in your life. And that didn't deter you from anything that you did while you had the title. And that by far amazes me more than anything else. And I appreciate that as a woman, because those are the kind of women we want to look up to, is people who make a difference, stand on their faith, their morals, their values, their story, and no one gets to edit it out.
Absolutely. And that's where, again, I go back to, saying about what kind of queen would I be? And I go back to my Circle of Trust ladies in the South Carolina, North Carolina pageant, where really the whole troublemaker thing started was back in that time when we came back to crown our successor. And those ladies were ushered out of the arena after they crowned their successor because they stood up to the directors. And it was just a big deal. And it was something that should have never happened. And that's then I went on to then pay for that as well. In something that these women, all of us were there to empower women. And I think that's where we lose. I have this platform to empower, but then pageantry came along. And just because my passion and my platform is breast cancer, because that's what I went through, don't get it twisted that I'm also here to empower women for anything else. And so I think that's where the pageant system is like, wait a minute, and I never, that's what was so shocking. And we always laughed that we were trauma bonded together, and that's why we're such good friends. But I think there is some truth in that, where you go through something like this. And I think what they didn't expect was that there was going to be some fierce ladies in that group, and that we weren't going to take that. And so I commend them. They are beautiful women of wonderful, wonderful character. And I will stand next to them any day of the week. And we just need more women like them.
Well, I tell you, in our class, you can find a whole handful of those women in our class that have experienced some post-nationals trauma, and none of it really highlighting any of the sisters. Really, it's just the organization, and we're putting our foot down, and sometimes that is just silence and not continuing. I don't know if it was you or somebody else that told me sometimes silence is the best thing to offer. And I think
I have a hard time with that.
No, I do too.
But I agree with it. And I think that was, part of, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I've talked to many of your sisters afterwards who reached out to me because our South Carolina, North Carolina girls sort of, I'll say this stuff has been going on for years, And I'm proud to be in the group of ladies that said enough, that you weren't going to do it to us anymore. And then it kind of rolled into nationals. But then it kind of came out that there may be some other places that are doing it. And I can't speak to that. I haven't been there. I don't know. But I've had multiple ladies reach out to me because we were very vocal about ours and say, oh my gosh. So if nothing else happens, if not, I mean, I could write a book. I could do a documentary on everything that has occurred. So call me, Hulu, if you're looking for a documentary.
So wait.
I know, right? But I could. And the thing is that that is where I'm then proud that your group were like, well, wait a minute, that sounds like, well, I don't like this either. And it usually takes women to stand up. And that's where those girls, my, circle of trust ladies, that's what I always tell them. So proud of them. They stood next to me. They called me at nationals. And when I went out for y'all's nationals and stuff, I mean, it was like, girl, they sent me flowers, they're just the sweetest things in the world. But fierce women. And I pray that this is a, revival, because we need that in this industry. Pageantry it was always about empowering women, and it should still be that way. And we need to stick to that. And that means that we truly empower women and we don't take away their voices.
Absolutely. I think some hands I think organizations, the hands need to change in some of these organizations for sure. Or it's going to die.
100%. And the sad part is what I said in that title, it has a lot of weight, but it only has as much weight as we allow it to have. And if it's a good organization and one that is doing good things like it has for years, then it will continue. But when you start having women rise up and say, this is not okay, that's not going to sustain itself. And it will break my heart. But what kind of person would I be? What kind of woman would I be to just say nothing, knowing that it's not okay?
Because one day it could be our daughters. And I don't know my daughter. I was actually asked, would you let your daughter compete in a pageant? And I said, absolutely not. Here are the reasons. Mm-hmm. And because things have to change.
They do.
Things have to change. And I'm a mama bear when it comes to my kids and the state that we live in these days. And I want them to be uplifted and protected and not taken advantage of.
Yeah, I agree. And the beautiful part of the America system is Elaine Marmel is at the helm of it, and she's absolutely a beautiful woman. And it's so cool that a woman is running it. Mm-hmm. And she was wonderful to me. I cannot ever say anything bad about Elaine. She was absolutely wonderful to me. But I cannot say that about my state directors, and I can't say that about other people in the system. And the women that I competed with are absolutely wonderful. And y'all were absolutely wonderful. And I love all of that. Isn't it funny how you can have all these people who are wonderful, and then you have a few of these other people who aren't? Yep. And that's what messes up the whole thing.
Yep. Yeah. Well, there are lots of women in my system, my class, that love you. And we see you. We wish we would have had more time with you, but we're glad that we had some moments of.
Me too.
What I'm thankful for is that what you did and what we saw in you was very evident just in your demeanor. And that says a lot. It says a lot. So disregard any of the, you're such a troublemaker. Well, here's another one coming right at you. We're all stepping over the line with you. And, you talked about Peter denying Christ, but he was also his fiercest.
Absolutely. Isn't that the truth? That's a good one. I like that.
Well, Peter's my favorite because I relate to him the most.
Yeah.
I get off when I don't need to. I get angry and I'll voice how I'm feeling, but I'll also back it up and say, Lord, I'm not going away. What do you have for me now? Let's go after it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, in closing, I want you to tell me how we can get your book, because cancer is the thorn in the side of America. It is those horrible sicknesses that I do believe they have a cure for as well. I will proudly put on my tinfoil hat. Um, but that's not going to make sick people are just going to continue to make them money. So
Yeah,
as
it
we
is.
do, my cousin right now, he has terminal cancer. It could be
Oh,
what kills him one day. Thank you, Lord. MD Anderson, he got
oh,
diagnosed.
they're wonderful.
Yes, got diagnosed in 2020. He is still with us today, and we just
Oh,
found out last week that there's no new growth. This is a very,
oh,
very, I think one in millions get this, and 5 years is as long as they've ever lived with it. And he's been with us almost 4 more years. So praise God for that. But he has a little girl. So tell me about your book a little bit.
okay. So the book is being published. It's called Finding the David Within. It will be available on Amazon. And the Finding the David Within is all about that. God will never put a Goliath in front of us. If we don't have a David within us.
I love
And I truly believe that. I mean, we all are that. And so it will be available on Amazon as soon as it is published. It's being illustrated now, so I'm so excited. And it really is a book for anybody that wants to tell children about cancer. It doesn't have to be, like I said, a parent. It could just be anybody. And yeah, and then check out, if you're a breast cancer survivor or you know someone, check out my blog at www.theblondebombshell.net. And follow me on Instagram at the blonde bombshell 22. Sorry, blonde bombshell 22. So yeah,
I'm so
that's
proud of you. I'm so honored that you even agreed to be on this in my
I'm
startup.
excited.
You're the sweetest. But thank you for being an example for us. Thank you for taking something that you didn't have a lot of experience in and honestly dominating it with grace. I think
Oh,
you've
thank
done a
you.
beautiful job. So thank you for
Thank you.